office hours. We're looking forward to going over some announcements from the Semantic Kernel side and then diving into your questions as well. Mark, if you don't mind going on to the next slide, I just want to remind everyone that we have two different office hours mechanisms for you to engage with. We have our weekly office hours for US and EMEA, which is the one you've joined into, and that occurs every week from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I have a QR code below too if you want to be able to add that series to your calendar. But this is really a time to be able to join in, ask any questions that you may have, anything that you've encountered going through Semantic Kernel. And then we also announce and share some of our latest features as well for your knowledge. And then we also have a monthly office hours for those who are in APAC, and that's on the second Wednesday of every month from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And that's very similarly to all the questions that you may have, and we go through announcements as well. And so thank you so much for joining in for office hours. And then in between office hours, if you do have any questions, we use GitHub discussions very heavily in our team and triage that every 48 hours for getting back to you. So that's another great avenue to get teams feedback as well. On the next slide, just want to remind everyone of some of the updates we've been having around our releases. I've put a link in the PowerPoint deck as well of our updated releases for both Python and .NET, especially with everything that's happening with Ignite. We have a lot of great things that are getting announced and added into our releases. So if you haven't had a chance to check out both .NET and Python, we recommend that as well. And then on the next slide, I want to go ahead and highlight all the great work we've been doing with documentation. And so especially around the Ignite timeframe, there's a lot of updates that we're having around different features, things that are moving to be outside of experimental. And so we'll dive into a couple of those updates of what's coming in some of our latest updates. Don't want to take away those announcements, but if you are going through any of the implementation, have questions, the docs are a great way to start, and then engage your team if you have further questions or feedback as well, as we always love to hear how people are landing with those as well. And then on our next slide, if you don't mind progressing on, we have our roadmap, and so especially coming into the holiday period, we'll be working on some of our backlog and roadmap items as well. But this is a really great place to come and understand what the team is working on, what we've prioritized in our backlog to understand how our product is evolving. And then from there on the next slide, I just want to highlight some of our latest announcements from Ignite. There are even more blogs than I have on screen, but wanted to just highlight a few in particular. We have a great update around AutoGen and Semantic Kernel and some progress that we are moving forward with all of our agent updates from Ignite. And so I know we've had a number of questions in office hours and in GitHub discussions, and so that's a great one to be able to dive into. We also have some updates around agents with Microsoft 365 with Semantic Kernel and being able to enhance multi-channel AI. And so it's a really great blog that was released yesterday to dive into that further. We have some updates as well from customers and some of our customer stories. We have a few that I've highlighted here, and there are a few more on our blog. But we have a upcoming night session. If you haven't been able to add that to your calendar, it's on this upcoming Friday, and we'll be featuring Centauri, Fujitsu, and a few others on stage. And so this is a really great overview of what they've been doing with Semantic Kernel for you to be able to learn more from there as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark to cover updates from his side.
Okay. Thanks, Sophia. Yeah, so we've got a couple of updates, and we'd like to talk about to do with our integration with Microsoft Extensions AI. So Roger, are you ready to? I can hand over to you, and you can do a quick demo.
Yeah, just yeah, I can jump in right away. 1 second. Let me share my screen. Yeah, just confirm if you can see my screen.
Yep, okay.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. So this pretty much is a demonstration with our latest connector update, where we can now run function calling with Olama, as well as Azure AI Inference, which runs models that could run also models hosted by Olama. In this demonstration, I'll be showing, as well as AI inference models. But pretty much the overall idea. Let me share the is the navigation here. Yeah, so first of all, when you set up this demonstration, the best way to do that is really running a Olama Docker machine in your environment. If you have a GPU, it's very simple to use. All of those links will be available into the README file. So the Olama function calling, which you can find as well in the semantic kernel. This is the semantic kernel repo. In samples demonstrations, you see this in the Olama function calling example. We are just updating this README to have the link, but pretty much you set up the Olama, make it run in your machine, will be something similar to this. So for this demonstration, I have Llama 3.2 and Llama 3.1 model installed. So I'm just running the Llama 3.1 here. And I'm going to use the demonstration targeting the 3.1 with the Olama chat completion. And for this demonstration, I have 3 plugins. So I have my alarm plugin, my light plugin, which is a stateful plugin, and my time plugin, right? So these demonstrations, the demonstration or also gives some hints in how you can trigger those plugins with the model. So if I can ask to change the alarm, I can ask what is the current alarm. So this will use your current state of the alarm for yourself. So let me just bring my camera. Okay, so moving on, how I can run this. So I have the demonstration, by the way, is already running. Let me close this one and run the demonstration. So this is the demo, it's already running, and I'm just going to ask what is the alarm. So this, let me show the My Alarm plugin. So the My Alarm plugin has the get the current alarm and set the alarm. So I just want to check what is the current time of this alarm. And this demonstration, when we add the plugin, I'm setting the plugin already starting with 11, which is the alarm value. So probably if I ask what is the alarm, it will give me what is the value of this alarm. So let me just wait and run this demonstration again really quick. Okay, yes. Let me run this. Yep, so what is the current alarm set? And this will eventually call the model in my machine. Let me see if it is running in the logs. Yes, it is running. We just need to wait a little bit. Sometimes the model needs a cold start. And if it doesn't run, I can just skip away and show in a later moment on this presentation. But pretty much the overall idea is that once you trigger this, it will be called the function and give you back the value of the alarm. Let me see. Just give one pass here. Yeah, it's just triggering the model for me. But the overall idea is that it will trigger the function, just have a cold start. Unfortunately, I changed the model for the 3.2 recently to 3.1, and it can take some time in my machine to get the model in a good state to run the presentation. But yes, if you want to continue talking while I'm just presenting here, Mark, feel free.
Sure. I'll tell you what, I can switch over. I've got a demo to do as well, so
Yep.
I can switch to that, and then we
So
can switch back in a second, you know?
Sure.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about transforming semantic kernel functions. And we've put together a sample, and also there's a blog post to kind of go along with it. And we did this because we had multiple customers who were coming to us with a very similar problem that they needed to solve. So what they were doing is they had existing functions that they wanted to use with automatic function calling, but they didn't want the LLM to have to kind of provide all of the arguments to the function or all of the input parameters, because some of the input parameters were, say sensitive information, and they didn't want to pass that information to the LLM to have it passed back so that it could do function calling. So we put together a sample, and let me kind of like talk through the sample, which shows one way to solve this, right? So I'll make the code a little bit bigger, right? But yeah, so this is the transform plugin sample, right? So basically here I've got a class here called user favorites, and it has two methods, one which will return a favorite color and another which will return a favorite animal. And in this case, both of these functions take an email address, and we want to, for the sake of argument, we want the email address to be the sensitive information that we don't want to have to send to the LLM. So if we advertise these functions to the LLM, and then we ask it to say, I ask it, what color should I paint the fence? It'll give me a response back, and but the bottom line will be is that it wants to know, it knows there's a function there that will give me the user's favorite color, but it doesn't have the user's email address. So it's going to ask you for your email address so that it can call that function. And for certain customers, they don't want that to happen. What they want to do is they want to hide that parameter from the LLM and basically inject the parameter when the function gets called. So one approach to solve this is to transform the plugin, right? So what we're doing in this case is that we're creating the plugin the way we normally would from the user favorites class. I create my plugin, and then I'm creating a new plugin with customized parameters. And what I'm doing is I'm doing two things. One is I am going to exclude parameters that are called email, right? So I'm basically going to create a new function which has the same functionality as the original, but it doesn't have an email parameter. And then when the function gets executed, when any of these functions get executed, I'm going to inject the email address dynamically, right? So I'm going to use bob@contoso.com, his email address. So that will get injected dynamically. And you could have, this is very simple logic, but you could have much more complicated logic that injects additional parameters when the function's being called. So in this case, for the transformation, what I'm doing is I'm going to hide certain parameters, but you could do anything. You could, hide parameters. You could change parameter names, change their descriptions, change the function descriptions, or even provide your own delegate that wraps around the function and basically injects services or does additional things. But so what happens now is we go back to kind of like just quick look at the functions. You can see here that if the email is bob@contoso, his favorite color is green, everyone else's favorite color is blue. And for favorite animals, Bob's favorite, say, reptiles are a lizard, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of call the function with a couple of different questions. So what color should my new car be? What color should I paint the fence? What's my favorite cold-blooded animal? And you can see here in the responses that come back, it says, your new car should be green because that's your favorite color. It recommends the same when you're painting the fence, it should be green. And it knows that when I ask for a cold-blooded animal, that lizard is one of my favorites, as are salamander and tuna. So you can see here, there's lots of different people have used this technique in lots of different ways, but it's just if you have existing code that you want to use for function calling, a lot of the times the existing code will have been written, or the functions will have been written for developers to call rather than an LLM to call. So if you don't want to kind of like create brand new wrappers, you can basically just kind of like import the plugins and then just do simple transforms to them. Okay. Okay, so that's what I wanted to present on. So so Roger, you ready to take back over?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Let me take over really quick. Okay. One second. Okay, let me share my screen now. Just confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Yep, I
So I'm
can
gonna
see you.
run the demonstration from the get-go. Let me. So this demonstration has different plugins, and I have this stateful plugin, which is my light bulb, which is turned on, and it's get true. So I have one plugin which is stateful, and if we look at here, the turn on is set as to true, the alarm is set to 11, and we have a stateless plugin. So let's just run a function call, an invocation. I put some breakpoints in the functions that I have in the plugins, in the alarm as well. And I'm just going to play with those in the Olama. So my Olama is finally running here. And each of those API calls will be kind of listed here as I use the model. So I can just use like what is my current alarm, which will capture the current value of my plugin. We can see that the breakpoint was being reached here using the current alarm state. It will give back to the model the value of the alarm, which is 11. Then I can just set the new value for it, which will be 9 p.m. and it triggers the other function, the other method from my plugin. This is all happening in the model asking in the client side to call a function, passing down 9 p.m. as the parameter. This sets the value to the new value, so it's now 9 p.m. And as a result of this function, it gives back what is the current setting, which is the previous function. So it will give to the model that it's successfully set to 9 p.m. I can also make questions like asking what is the state of the light, if it's on or off, and it will trigger checking if it's turned on in my light plugin. So this is another stateful scenario in which you want to control the state in your application and you can use the AI model to interact with you, with your application. And this gives back to the model that it is on, and I can set this to just turn off the light. So turn off the light, please. So this will eventually trigger the turn off method, and everything kind of working straight away with a local model with function calling capability. The same applies for the Azure AI inference. All you have to do will be just using your add Azure AI inference. Oh, I had to stop here. So Azure AI inference. Let me see. Oh yes. So you have Azure AI inference completion, provide the inference endpoint and an API key, and the demonstration will be literally the same as I did here, just for the sake of the time. That is more like that's the overall wrap of this demonstration. Thank you.
Great.
Great.
Thanks so much, Roger and Mark. Really appreciate you going through both of these demos. I was curious, didn't see any questions in chat, but does anyone want to come off of mute? Does anyone have any questions or any thoughts that they want to share with the group?
Yeah, in fact, Sophie, I have a question for both Mark as well as Roger. I'll kind of start off with Roger if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Roger, I know I totally understand the function auto call behavior, right? Uh, auto, we are totally leaving up to the LLM to kind of decide which function to call. And I know there is an option inside say auto invoke is equal to true. By default, my understanding is that's true, so it'll go ahead and invoke the. But the part which I'm not so kind of super clear of is when we have function called behavior dot required, right? And let's say I give it one or two functions which are available which are available, and I also set auto invoke to true. That behavior, I am a little unclear of what I should be expecting.
Yeah,
So
maybe
when
Sergey, you can help me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can answer this question. So Semantic Kernel have a new function calling model that supports three behaviors like auto function calling or auto function calling behavior, then required function choose behavior, and then non-function choose behavior, right? So with auto one, you're basically telling the model, hey LLM, just like here the list of the functions for you, and like if you need to call one of them when that you resolve the prompt, please do, right? So you're kind of like giving the LLM an option whether to call the function or not to call, and LLM make that decision itself. With required function choice behavior, you're basically saying the model that you must call that function.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter whether to answer the user's prompt, you don't need to call a function, but you still obliged to call the function. That's the main difference between those two.
Okay. Yeah, and that's where Sergey, I'm kind of seeing a difference because I've advertised, two functions, through the required behavior. I've kind of given it two functions, right? And what I'm kind of seeing that it is definitely, it's still kind of making its decision and kind of saying, hey, you know what, which one to call. It's not really kind of invoking both of them because of, and I'll tell you how I'm kind of I have like function filters kind of set up to kind of see if it's being invoked, right? And I'm not kind of seeing both of them being invoked.
So the reason why you see this behavior, well, I believe the reason is that today semantic kernel allows to call required function only once. And the reason for this is because if semantic kernel doesn't stop the invocation, the function will be called endlessly.
Okay.
Because there should be a point somewhere in the code allowing you to say, hey, just like this function was called enough times and it should be stopped, right? And in semantic kernel, we plan to add that kind of like a callback or a filter that would allow you just to terminate function invocation or required function invocation. But at the moment, until the point we have that filter, we are restricting number of calls of required functions to one, preventing from endless execution of that function.
Okay. So, and it just so that, and even though that kind of probably, I tried kind of setting parallel calls to true, that didn't help, and then another thing which also confused me was in the required, in the function choice behavior that required, there is also an option to say auto invoke, right? Does it really matter if you set it to true or false in that case?
It's matter. I think
Okay.
if you set, well, by default it's true, which means that semantic kernel will invoke it for you if you don't configure that. But as soon as you assign it to the false, it means that you as a caller of the semantic kernel API will be responsible for handling all the function calls from our model.
Okay.
Whether it give you the option of calling more than one function, I need to check that. Okay. It may give you the full freedom because you are in this manual invocation mode, and it's up to you to decide how many times you need to call that function. So it may be basically it may be an option for you for now until semantic kernel having this callback, allowing you to prevent endless invocation. So you can try to set it to false and handle the function calls yourself. There should be very extended sample in our repo describing how to use manual function invocation. Please have a look.
Okay.
I'll share the link to it so you can try it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sergey. That helps, and
Welcome.
that kind of explains my thing. Okay, I had two. Okay, why is it getting just one getting called? I think this helps,
Yes.
explain that scenario. Now coming to the question that I had with Mark was again, the example which you showed about modifying function parameters, super helpful, right? Because that's something which is critical. We want to be able to kind of pull in and pass values as function arguments from different sources, right? Could be config, right? Could be from the user context, right? So the question is there a sample which shows passing in or retrieving those arguments from, let's say, a service grabbed from the DI container, or is this even possible?
Yes, I mean it is possible. I'm not aware of a sample, and if anybody else is, maybe chime in, right? But yeah, I mean you have kind of like full control over the kind of like the kernel functions that you're building, and whether they support DI or not, like and then once you kind of convert the code into a kernel function, you can basically then you can advertise to the LLM, and the LLM can call it, like but we have a lot of let me take a note on that one, right? Because I think we can probably put together a very simple example quite quickly, and share it out over the next week or so,
Sure,
but
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And Mark, one more quick thing. My understanding is that would potentially be possible, right? That injection would be possible only if it is like a kernel function, code-based, function. But if we are using a plugin, right, which is based on OpenAI, right, then will that still hold? Will we still be able to, inject, or maybe grab a parameter from the kernel and pass it in, right, to something which is a plugin which is created from OpenAI, right? OpenAPI, sorry. I get my
OpenAPI. Yeah. Okay.
OpenAPI,
Yeah. We make that mistake all the time as well.
Oh, yeah.
No, with OpenAPI, actually, Sergey, do you want to jump in here? If you're using OpenAPI endpoints, do you want to inject dependencies?
I think that the only possible way to do it today via the transformation heuristic Mark just shared a few minutes ago. That would be the only option at the moment.
Yeah, we're doing something similar. We created a kind of like an extension method, for plugin, and we are grabbing the the parameters that we want to kind of set from these different sources, and then passing it in, and pretty much Mark, based on the example, right, overriding that those values for the function parameters, very similar to how your example, Mark. That transformation is kind of working well, but we wanted to kind of take it a step further and see, hey, what can we get values from DI, etc. But we felt kind of it wasn't possible, so wanted to kind of confirm with you all.
So it's partially possible, because what you can do in that transformer delegate, which Mark's shown, is like that delegate may have a kernel parameter, and semantic kernel is smart enough to understand, oh well, there is a plugin or function registered with the kernel parameter, and what semantic kernel will do, it automatically inject or call that delegate with the kernel, and having a kernel give you access to the services property on the kernel, where you can resolve everything you've registered, like when you've created an instance of a kernel, or when you've registered the kernel into your service collection. So that's basically kernel.services is the link between that delegate and your service collection. So you can fully leverage this DI inside that delegate.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point, Sergey. I will investigate that and kind of see if we can, use that and kind of get a handle of services that we want. Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephen. Really appreciate the question. I'm seeing in chat that there's a number of really good questions. Soren, would you mind coming off of mute? Would love to dive into your question further with the audience as well.
Hi, guy, and thank you for being here. I was trying the agent path, which I'm fully aware is still not ready for prime time, so I'm not complaining about that. I just try to understand how I can augment one existing agent, but only that one with my collections of documents. So initializing it memory or whatever, either way, I wasn't able to find how to do it. Is that already done someplace or it's not there yet? And that's why I'm missing.
Yeah, so that you should be able to do that right now. I'm not sure if we have a good example for it, right? But each agent can have its own configuration in terms of um, what AI services or what AI connectors it's using, and also what functions it's configured to use. So you could write one agent that is, yeah, a specialist on some area of some set of PDF documents or some domain, and it has access to the functions, so it can basically retrieve relevant information when it's needed for that particular domain. So you should be able to do it right now. We may just have a gap here just in terms of our samples, and then just in terms of where we are with our agent framework, like there's a lot of really great announcements kind of coming out this week during Ignite, and so our goal is post Ignite, when all of those announcements have landed, is to start moving our agent framework, getting it ready for GA and lining it up with everything else that's being announced over the next week or so.
Oh, that's cool news.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much for the question. And then in chat, I also saw some good points from Eric. Eric, would you mind coming off of mute? We'd love to dive into your question.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so first of all, thanks a lot for the office hours. It's been really extremely helpful in everything. So yeah, so we used fixed plans pretty extensively, the handlebars plans, to orchestrate native and semantic functions. In many cases where the operations are known and we simply just need to understand based on user intent, like what particular plan needs to work. I mean, there are other cases where it's more dynamic, but so we're making use of handlebars planners pretty extensively, and what we really like about it is the template. It's very easy to define the sequence and the variable passing and everything, and well, we definitely see how there's big benefits in the dynamic plan generation. I'm sorry, big benefits in like dynamically doing things in a different way. If there's a fixed plan, it just seems much simpler to be able to plan, to invoke the plan. So I think the issue was that, we heard that handlebars planning is going to be deprecated. So it wasn't fully clear if that meant that only the plan generation would be deprecated, because it sounded like the handlebars template engine would be retained. So that put the question of whether or not plan.invoke would work still.
Yeah, really great question, Eric. I know in terms of the templating that is sticking around, but actually I see we have Dimitro on. Dimitro, do you want to dive into this a bit more?
Yes, so in terms of handlebars planning and handlebars template engine, we are going to keep handlebars template engine, and we are going to continue to support it. So it's going to work together with other template engines that are supported by Semantic Kernel, but we're not, as you already mentioned, like we're going to deprecate handlebars planning capability, because based on our testing, using function calling works more reliably, and it uses fewer amount of tokens. So basically, it's cheaper to use function calling capability over the planning capability which we developed previously, and the results are pretty much the same, and the capabilities are pretty much the same. So you're still able to define your functions. You're still able to include your functions, and then achieve your goal basically by specifying some user ask, and then function calling capability will allow you to call necessary functions in order to achieve that goal. So most probably like plan.invoke async won't be supported in a long term. But we have an example. I'm going to share it in the chat, which shows how to use automatic function calling instead of stepwise planner. But I think like it's kind of similar and applies to handlebars planner as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think the challenge for us is that if you use automatic function invoking, you still have to call the LLM to, at least as far as I understood, and maybe I kind of misunderstand how it works. But even if you had a fixed plan, you'd have to call the LLM to define what your next function to sequence to execute is. When with the other case in the handlebars plan, you don't really need to know, because like it's a fixed plan, it's already defined, you just need to orchestrate. So you wouldn't need to call an LLM to determine, like, say if out of 5 functions, 4 are native functions and 1 is semantic, like those 4 native functions, you can just do all these operations without any LLM calls, and then just the last one, you would need to make a call just for the semantic function, but the orchestration wouldn't need a semantic function.
Yeah, and by fixed plan, you mean like some plan that is stored in a file which you can execute immediately, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's still possible to do that in a little bit different way if you are working with chat history. So for example, in case you don't have a plan, you just have a function, and then you have like user ask, for example, right? So for the usual process, how it's going to work, like you're going to send a request to LLM, it's going to reply with some functions to call, you're going to call that functions, put all of the results from that functions in chat history, and then get your result, right? So what you can do next, as a next step, for example, if you like this flow that was generated by LLM and you want to reuse it, but you want to avoid calling LLM in the future, just reuse the same workflow, call the same sequence of functions, for example, you can take that chat history that was generated for you after the first call, and then you can serialize it. And if you want to use it later, you can store it somewhere, in a file or in a database, for example. If you want to reuse it in the future, you just basically deserialize it, and then grab a list of functions that was described in that chat history previously, and then just invoke them again.
Yes,
and you can use that chat history, and you can use the same chat history, basically pass it again to LLM if you want, and the LLM can figure out like what to do next as a next step.
Yeah, I think I think you should also take a look at the process framework, right? So the handlebars planner kind of like represented our thinking at a particular point in time before the model supported function calling, and we were really trying to work around some limitations in the model. So the models have gotten better. They do function calling now. Like we've started solving some quite complicated workflows where part of the workflow is deterministic, another part is more stochastic, and where you need the LLM's input using the process framework, and we're getting very good results. And the team is investing pretty heavily in that area, right? So I think that's something you should take a look at, because it does give you something you can define once and then reuse multiple times, which sounds like it's important for you. So yeah, so I'd recommend you take a look at process framework, and there's going to be some interesting things you're going to be able to do with that in the future as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, that does seem to be pretty well aligned with what we're doing. I think it's probably a matter of us investigating it and seeing like how lightweight it is and its ability to like pass data across tasks and everything. But yeah, it seems like seems like a great suggestion. Thanks.
Thanks.
Great, thanks, Eric. I'm going to go to one more chat question, and we'll get to some of our hands raised as well. Amal, do you want to come off of me? We'd love to dive into your question that I saw in chat.
Sure. Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you
Hello?
perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So what I want to know here is there any way when we call the function, can we always ensure that one of the parameters is ingested, something like the user email or the user ID? This will help to get some function. Is that possible?
Can you repeat your question, because it seems your voice has dropped and like I wasn't able to hear the last.
So we have a chat application, and from the chat application we are calling the plugins or functions right within that. So when it does that, we want to pass the logged in user's email ID to the function so that we can get the context of the user who is using it and then retrieve the results based on the user. So how can we ensure that every time the user, we have the other parameters along with that, how can I ensure that this parameter is always passed to all my functions?
Are you in position to extend the signature of the function that being called and like add 2 extra parameters to that function?
Yeah, we can do that. It's an open API functions. We are already defining the functions.
So that could be one option. So like add those parameters you want your function to be called with as a parameters, and again, so that should be it. And the second approach was demonstrated by Mark at the beginning of the office hour session. What you can do, you can use the transformation technique basically to wrap your function to a delegate and transform the parameters. For example, you may not want to expose like user email to LLM because for some reason, well, your organization policies may consider that PII data and like LLM can be live somewhere on the cloud out of your premises. And like, well, in this case, what you can do, you can basically wrap your function into a delegate that would have all the parameters from the original function minus email. And inside that delegate, you can obtain that email from any other place you want. For example, you can get it from the GWT token, which is used for authentication purposes, or you can access it from any service that you might have, I don't know, registered in your DI container. So inside that delegate, you have access to everything that your kernel has access to. So yeah, so that's 2 primarily ways how you can achieve that. Either add the parameter to your function, or to wrap the function and obtain the argument for that parameter either from from the kernel itself.
So in the first option, just call that parameter as logged in user something, and then it automatically ingests it, and it calls the method.
So I'm trying to understand your scenario. In your scenario, who is the caller of the function? Is it LLM who calls it, or is it like you call it manually?
LLM is calling it.
And for your scenario, is it okay to share the logged in user email with LLM?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I missed that question.
So my understanding that in your scenario, you want a function to be called with the email of a user who
Correct.
logged in, right?
Yes.
And my question is it okay to share the email of logged in user with LLM?
Yeah, because instead of email ID, we will be using some enterprise ID or something. So it may not be the email ID, some unique ID to distinguish that user.
So, okay, then in this case, what you need to do, you need to add an extra parameter ID or email into your function. Mm-hmm. And then when you are sending a prompt to LLM, you need to specify that ID in the prompt. So LLM, when resolving your prompt, see, oh, well, I need to call this function, and that function expect ID, and in the prompt, I was provided that ID. And an LLM will be smart enough to craft the parameters for your function and stick that the user ID or email you passed in the prompt into the argument and call that function with that argument. But that would be probably a long round trip, and passing email to LLM and asking to call the function with this ID is kind of maybe not so efficient. And I would advise you to apply the technique Mark shared at the beginning of the session, where you're basically transforming your function and don't pass the unnecessary information to LLM if you can obtain it from the local source or from your app, from the Venue app. That would be my advice.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Great, thanks for the question. I'm going to go over to some of our raised hands and then come back to chat. Steve, do you want to come off of mute? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I was wondering on the kernel storage package that was split off a while back. I haven't really dove into that too much since it got split apart from the SK package. Does anyone know off the top of their heads, does that have a built-in integrated parsing engine for multiple file formats to at least extract text, so that we can keep that locally?
Can you just expand a little bit on what you mean by parsing text? Is this for text chunking or?
Yeah, so as a user would upload a file to to a chatbot or to a UX, want to provide some quick parsing on that file and extracting all the text out of that file. I was wondering if that package has like a parsing engine built into it that's compatible with multiple file types. We have one that we've built, but it's for a different purpose on Azure and microservice, and integrates into SharePoint. So I'll have to kind of refactor that for one-off file uploads. So I was kind of looking at kernel storage as a quick option if that had that built in.
No, we don't have that built in at the moment. We've just been focused on defining the Microsoft, the official abstractions for integrating with vector data stores. And basically, I'm building a bunch of implementations, right? So for the most popular vector stores that are out there, there is a text chunker in the semantic kernel, but it's very, very basic. But we rely on other libraries for actually parsing the documents. Like so I think we're using PDF Pig for parsing PDF documents, and we use other libraries for other document types. But yeah, we don't have anything built in ourselves.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Steve. Appreciate the question. Jeevan, do you want to come off of mute? We'd love to hear from you.
Sure. In fact, I have two questions. One is it's around tracking token usage in a streaming scenario with function call inside the mix, right? Want to kind of hear from the team if you all have some pointers that we could kind of use to kind of get the rough token usage for streaming. Streaming has always been a challenge, all right, to kind of get the the token count, and we needed to kind of for to kind of track usage, etc. Right now with function calls inside the mix, right, it's become even more difficult to kind of get a handle of especially the call, right, for when the LLM has made the first call and it's kind of has or a semantic kernel has made the first call, kind of gotten back from the LLM, hey, this is the function to call, right? We tried using the function filters over there. Wanted to kind of hear if if there is an approach the team would recommend us kind of go to kind of get token usage over there.
Yeah, my recommended way to do that will be to enable OpenTelemetry. Semantic kernel.
Okay.
Yeah, semantic kernel is compatible with OpenTelemetry, and you can see even in a Aspire dashboard, for example, you can track how many tokens, how your functions are being called. All of those meters and tracking information you can get straight away with OpenTelemetry.
Yeah. The problem is we need to kind of, and I would say, I would use the word decorate it or add some more, I would say, our custom attributes on top of it, right? Because, to say, hey, more like, who's using what, right? And and that's where, would that work? And that's why we were kind of running into a challenge.
Yeah, so I just share in the chat the example how to use your custom telemetry with filters.
Okay.
And it contains a code basically which grabs the token usage in streaming mode, and it's also using function calling. So
Awesome.
I would recommend trying this example. Try to run it locally. You should be able to see like all of the logging, including usage, and you should be able to access that usage programmatically in case you want to decorate with your additional information or something like that. And it should work.
Awesome.
And in case you face like any kind of problems with that, just let us know through GitHub discussions or GitHub issues, and we'll be able to investigate. But we just updated this example recently, so it should work as expected.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'll definitely take a look at it.
Yep.
And now I just want to make sure I'm not hogging anybody else's question, but I do have have another question too, if it's okay. All right.
Yeah, go for it, Jeevan.
All right. Yeah. So the question here is again, in case we wanted to kind of use a combination of, let's say, required function call. I have a function which I really wanted to be called, right? But I also have other functions, right, which we want the LLM to automatically, kind of decide. Is there a pattern, that the team would recommend that we kind of, go down and explore?
Quickly from top of my mind, what you can do, you can have two different modes. So for example, if you can split your operation in two, and like for the first part operation, you use required function call, and as soon as you get result, you may start executing the second part of the operation, which will use the auto function invocation. So that's splitting one operation into smaller ones, and using different function invocation choices for each part may resolve you. But at the moment today, the mixed or hybrid function choice invocation is not supported by any LLMs. At least that's what I know. So with, for example, with OpenAI, you can either set auto, required, or none. So, but there is no option saying just required and auto, or required and none.
So one thing, sorry, just quickly, one thing you could consider doing is in your prompt, put in function calls in there, and so they'll be triggered when the prompt is rendered, and then that information will always be sent to the LLM, and then you can give it the functions you wanted to optionally call. So you could do that. So you wouldn't be relying on a round trip to the LLM to call those required functions. They would just automatically be called when the prompt is being rendered.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Thanks, Sergey. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we will definitely investigate that.
Great. Thanks so much for the question. I'm seeing a few in chat. I want to start with one. Is there a timeline for streaming support for speech-to-speech in Semantic Kernel, similar to OpenAI, their real-time API? And so either Tao or Roger, is there an update on speech-to-speech?
This is in current stage of investigation for now, but as soon as we have any roadmap on the planning for this, we will share with the community. If you're going to jump, Mark, please.
Yeah, and we have a sample at the moment. Dimitro put together a sample, so you can do it right now, and you can do some function calling, like, so yeah, I don't know, Dimitro, if you want to just maybe paste your sample into the chat.
Yeah, already did.
Oh, you did. Perfect. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. And then I see one other question. Brett, do you still have an outstanding question? I'd love to hear from you too.
Thanks. Yeah, so I do have just a bit of a clarification question for Dimitro there based on the example he shared. So based on my understanding of those function invocation filters, once you're processing the output of the function on the back half of that filter, that is what allows you to override the output or make any changes or anything you want to do there. So since the example you shared is awaiting the entire stream in order to get that full message back, as well as access that usage metadata, would the total function not be returned once the entire stream has been rendered, which kind of eliminates the benefit of streaming to begin with, because at that point you don't return the first chunk until all chunks have been processed by the filter? Is there something I'm misunderstanding there?
Yeah, I need to double check that example. That's a good question. But with the ability to override streaming chunks in function invocation filter, there's a basically it's possible to return each chunk from that filter, and you will receive that the updated chunk from the place you start the invocation, and it's not going to basically block the process. I need to double check that specific example, but I'm going to share with you another example specifically for streaming, which basically just returns the updated chunk directly to the place where you start the invocation, so it does not block the process, and streaming basically is preserved there.
Yep. Well, so to be clear, for my use case, I'm not looking to override the streaming chunks right now. My main requirement is to actually log the token usage for each individual function call, so that at the message and conversation level, we can have those token usage metrics rather than just for OpenAI solution as a whole. So yeah, that would be something that would be interesting, where when I'm looking at this code, we could possibly even just not await that log function result async, which looks like it may work as well. But yeah, any insight there would be appreciated.
Yeah, you can do some testing on your side as well. I'm just going to share another example of streaming. And in that example, we do update streaming chunk just for demonstration purposes. But what you can do, you can iterate over the result and just yield return exactly the same chunk, but together with that, grab the information regarding token usage and then log it. But in order to preserve the streaming, I think you would still, and so if you want to iterate over the chunks in filter and preserve the streaming as it is, you still, I think you still need to override the context result with the new instance of ISing enumerable. So in that case, your streaming will work in a way that you will receive first chunk. Firstly, you will receive it in filter, and then you will receive it in the place where you start the invocation, right? And then the same with the second chunk, third chunk, and so on. So if you want to preserve that ability, I think you need to override the context result and return ISing enumerable, and inside basically iterate over each chunk and then grab the usage information from there, but you don't need to update it, you just return it as it is. That makes sense.
So yeah, that's actually what our streaming function is already doing. We're already doing exactly that, where we basically just create a second stream that's populated with the initial stream. It's just, yeah, the problem right now is we don't have access to the metadata as part of that.
Yeah, so if you combine those two examples that I shared, it should work. But in case you have still some problems with that, just let us know, and I will create another example which combines, your use case, and yeah, it should work, I suspect.
Okay, I've actually also got another quick question on the topic of streaming there. So one of our requirements is that we should be able to, in our conversational agent, have both streaming and non-streaming scenarios based on the client that is conversing with it. So is it possible, or are there any examples of designing functions or plugins that can be called from either of those two scenarios? Obviously, with the requirement for streaming functions to return those IAsync enumerables, they are kind of fundamentally different, but I'm curious if that's a use case or a requirement that you guys have considered before.
So basically, the ability to return IAsync enumerable from kernel functions, is that correct?
So we want to be able to have one function that we can call with the invoke streaming or just invoke async.
Yeah, I think it's possible today to do that.
And
So yeah.
I just wanted to clarify scenario, and like you want LLM to call that function, right, and basically provide and invoke that function with in an instance of a stream. And
So yeah,
the
so
stream.
yeah, exactly.
And when we're talking about the streaming, we are talking about the stream, or we are talking about this I think enumerable.
So at that point, it would be the async enumerable, because to be clear, this is a native function that is trying to be called from either a streaming or non-streaming scenario.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. We didn't consider it. So, and like, did you try to craft a plugin that would accept async enumerable and ask LLM to call it?
No, I haven't tried that yet. If that's something, if there's documentation on that, that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
So as far as I know, in case you define your kernel function that returns async enumerable, and then you want to use kernel to invoke that function directly without LLM, right? And you use invoke streaming async, I think, and you invoke that function, I think it will work as expected. So technically, it's possible from kernel to stream your results from the plugin in case it's native function, but I'm not sure how it's going to work when the function is asked to be called by LLM. So if you want to call function directly through the kernel, it's possible, but we just need to double check how it works in automatic function calling scenario. And if in case it works, create an example for that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everyone. With that, we'll go ahead and close our office hours for this week. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.